you all, and welcome to my TED Talk. My name is Dennison Bertram. I am from Tally. Tally. I'm going to be talking today about a protocol we're building around liquid staking for governance tokens. But before I get into it, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey of why what we're building is necessary and kind of like an overarching concern that we have learned over the past few years that is happening with DAOs. So at its core, if you think about many DAOs, you get a DAO token, maybe you buy it off the market, maybe you got it airdropped and you maybe vote with it, maybe you don't. At its core, governance tokens really intermingle these two kind of ideas, which is financial utility and organizational utility. So if you see here, if you think about it, you can do things like sell tokens on exchanges, take loans, put them into restaking, but then you can also operate the protocol, defend the treasury, vote on proposals. And most DAO tokens kind of fall into this Venn diagram, the overlap of these two things that you can do with the token. The problem is that token holders can't do both things at once. You can't both vote on proposals and have your token in Binance. You can't both vote on proposals and have a loan taken out against them and use them as collateral. So token holders have this kind of interesting opportunity cost that they deal with. They have to decide what do they want to do with their token. And this tension really has some interesting security consequences. Basically, if the token price goes to zero, you can generally assume the DAO is considered dead, right? Like people aren't interested in it. There's no speculative premium. There's no assumption that this DAO is going to work. So this token price goes to zero. And either that means that nobody cares and the DAO is dead, or actually for malicious actors, the cost for attacking the DAO is trivially low because the tokens are simply so cheap. So on the end where the token price is very low, DAOs lose their operational security. But interestingly, as the token price goes up, there's sort of this curve, and when we get to kind of infinity of a token price, you end up with the same sort of failure of security because all of the voting power, all of these tokens end up for sale, essentially. Right? You can kind of imagine as a DAO token reaches its maximum price, you have the maximal financial opportunity cost. Now token holders have to decide, do I want to vote or do I have this token that has extreme financial opportunity? Right? So you end up with this curve where as you get to infinity on the price, actually security of the DAO also goes away. Because of this, DAOs really struggle in setting their security parameters. And this is an example based on Uniswap. I'll walk you through it. There's 1 billion outstanding tokens, and DAO security parameters should be based on this outstanding 1 billion tokens. But instead, number two, they have to be guesstimated based on the total delegated tokens in governance. These are people who've decided to use the tokens to actually vote, and they've at least spent some money to delegate them. The undelegated tokens happens though in number three that are actually for sale are just almost as large. Actually in Uniswap it's like 158% of quorum is actually available for purchase on the exchange. So these are the token holders who are saying, hey, I actually opt for the financial opportunity on these tokens. And then when you look at the quorum down here for passing a proposal, it's very low. So average participation in Uniswap is almost exactly the quorum required to pass a proposal, but you could easily buy up all the tokens on the exchanges and be able to pass anything you wanted in Uniswap, right? So basically at the end of the day, what happens is because these DAOs have to sort of guesstimate what their security needs to be, they end up being vulnerable for the outstanding token supply. Basically holders who are stuck in some sort of limbo of this like duality of the usage of tokens. What this leads to is DAOs become honeypots for malicious actors. The longer a DAO lives, the longer the sort of opportunity here. And what we see is DAOs are actually becoming very vulnerable. Work from AVSA in the ENS DAO has shown that since March of 2023, the DAO is vulnerable to the free value raiders. This is a group of folks who declare the new DeFi is actually raiding DAO treasuries. They buy up tokens when they see that the token cost is lower than the treasury. And indeed in ENS, you have a situation where it only costs, well today it's a little bit higher, but it costs maybe about $70 million to earn $150 million. So this is actually a big danger that's outstanding today. ENS is dealing with it. They've created a kind of cancel role on the DAO that allows like a coalition of people in a kind of centralized way to cancel proposals they think are vulnerable. But we also see this happening. Aragon fell apart because of the similar situation. The free value raiders bought up the supply, and there was a big conflict if you follow that. Nouns rage quit is very similar. People started buying nouns when they realized that the book value of the nouns didn't match the treasury, specifically so that they could drain the treasury, and that was what was behind this, the nouns fork. We are tracking this, well, OpenZeppelin actually is tracking this in Compound, where there are holders that are actually getting close to quorum, and they've sort of amassed a large token position from the exchanges. They're getting close to quorum, and sure enough, there are now proposals in the Compound ecosystem that just pop up that have some sort of, hey, let's redistribute the treasury, or let's pay for some sort of program. So there's some sort of extractive activity happening there. But actually, so this is a danger. This is a true danger for the ongoing success of DAOs. This is something that we care very much at Tally. But actually, there's a much bigger danger, which is kind of in plain sight, but kind of innocuous, but actually seriously a big issue for DAOs, which is restaking. Restaking has an infinite need for economic security. So if you're not familiar with restaking, these are services like Eigenlayer, Symbiotic, Karak. Basically what they do is they allow you to borrow, you can bootstrap new protocols by borrowing the economic security of Ethereum. But there's a limited amount of ETH out there, and restaking services basically always have to fight to have the greatest economic security. Like Symbiotic, Eigenlayer, and others, they will always compete with one another to have the greatest amount of economic security. But there's only so much ETH out there. So what's going to happen is that they're going to actually end up outbidding protocols for their own economic security. Because if you think about a DAO such as Uniswap, for example, the token holders protect a protocol that in aggregate is extremely valuable. Right? Uniswap has done $1.5 trillion in volume since its inception. The protocol itself is extremely valuable, and each DAO token represents a kind of share of that value. Right? That economic value is something that can be used in restaking. You can put any sort of economic value into restaking and essentially say, hey, if you misbehave, we're going to take this from you, right? So what this sort of like logically leads to is that in the fight to have the greatest amount of TVL, the restaking protocols will eventually come to consume all protocols on Ethereum, and probably eventually all protocols, period, as they fight one another for economic security. So this is sort of what I was just describing, right? If you have service A has 50% of all available ETH to restake, and service B has 50% of all available ETH to restake, the way that they continue to grow in their economic security is to consume protocols, right? And when I say that restaking can always outbid the native protocol, think of it like this. You have a uni token holder who has this opportunity cost. They can either vote, or they can somehow earn yield somewhere, right? They could sell their token. Well, restaking services can say, hey, if you take your uni token and put it into our restaking services, we will pay you some sort of yield. Uniswap now has to outbid the restaking services, because the Uniswap has to say, no, 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 please hold on to your token so that you can vote in case there's a malicious proposal, or you can vote to operate the DAO. And that'll be really expensive. This is a nice sort of, if any of you played the game Katamari Damacy, basically you have this ball, you're this character, and you're rolling it around, and everything you touch, you sort of suck up. So I like to think of the restaking services like Katamari Damacy, where you just roll around and you eventually suck up everything. Right, so yeah, restaking can always outbid protocols because restaking can pay token holders as a share of protocol TVL. Right? If you have 1% of Uniswap DAO's token, you kind of represent 1% of Uniswap's TVL, or economic security, right? Because with enough of Uniswap tokens, you can do anything you want with the protocol. So restaking values it as a share of the TVL of the entire protocol. However, DAOs can only pay token holders as a share of revenue. right? So in the case of Uniswap, EigenLayer can pay Uniswap token holders as a share of the total TVL of Uniswap. However, Uniswap can only pay token holders as their share of the revenue, right? Uniswap can't pay them as the total TVL. So because of that, restakers can always pay more. And of course, then you can add in that you can restake your tokens over and over so that you sort of rehypothecate the value. So there's very difficult for DAOs to compete here. And this is also very inefficient, right? DAOs shouldn't be giving their revenue back to token holders as a function of someone outbidding them. They should be giving them revenue as part of like a function of operating the DAO. So yeah, at its extreme, 100% of DAO tokens are locked in EigenLayer, Symbiotic, and Karak, right? And the end result is either no one is left to vote and operate the protocol, which leads to the death of the protocol, which interestingly you would assume the restaking services should care about. But actually there is no economic alignment for restaking services to care about the death of the DAOs, right? If the underlying TVL of the economic security of what you're staking goes down, they simply look for some other new source of it, right? There's no mechanism here to turn around and say, hey, we should make sure the underlying assets are healthy, right? Maybe in ETH, where they have a main alignment with Ethereum problem that they have to deal with, but when we think about thousands of protocols that are going to be locked in it, it's not really in their interest, right? What's more likely to happen is that as the DAO dies, someone builds a new competing DAO where the tokens are not yet locked in EigenLayer or Symbiotic, and then you have this sort of circle go on. Of course, the other opportunity is that everyone has their tokens locked in restaking, and then malicious entities are the only ones who don't lock their tokens, because for them, they have a longer term valuation of the token because they intend to rug the treasury. So the solution here is to really split economic value from governance utility. And if any of you saw the Avengers movie, there's this great scene where she knocks basically Bruce Banner out of the Hulk, and that's a really great way to visualize what we are thinking about here, right? You have to split the governance utility from the financial utility, right? These things are co-mingled when you launch a DAO because it's important for bootstrapping the network effects of a protocol, right? You give out both something that has an economic value due to its speculative value, and it has organizational value. These two things have to be intertwined. But for the long-term success of the DAO, we have to split these two things. So, what is Tally building? Tally is building the liquid staking layer for governance tokens, right? Basically, what we are going to allow you to do is eliminate this opportunity cost that token holders have, right? Users get a liquid financial token, and DAOs maintain control over their security, right? Because DAOs can't outbid restaking for their security. So they have to find some sort of alignment with the fact that token holders want some sort of utility on their token. We are ideally positioned to build this. We're building this as a public good, as an open permissionless protocol, because today Tally already powers the largest, most valuable protocols in the ecosystem. We've been doing this since 2020. We support more than 50 EVM networks. Teams have trusted us to transfer over $500 million on the platform, and right now you can manage over $20 billion in DAO assets, right? So we're already positioned to actually create a protocol that we can distribute to the entire ecosystem all at once as a public good. This is a system diagram. It's a little bit complicated. I'm gonna just do really quickly. Basically, the idea of how it works is token holders deposit their DAO tokens into the protocol. Underlying, we pool these tokens and actually stake them in whatever underlying staking mechanism the DAO has. I'm not talking about this in this talk, but staking is coming to DAOs. The first example is Unistaker. Uniswap is launching staking to return protocol revenue to token holders. We manage that position in aggregate, which saves money and time and effort on token holders, and we return an LST to the token holder. But what's interesting here is that the LST token holders can delegate. They can participate directly in governance if they wish, but if they don't want to participate in governance, or they've put their LST token into some sort of thing like restaking that doesn't participate in governance, the undelegated voting power is redistributed to the DAO as its own security. So the DAO always maintains control over its own security. The idea behind this is that speculative holders shouldn't take security away from the DAO. This is kind of the problem we have. Many people participate in DAOs because they want to participate in DAOs. But because of the bootstrapping problem, many of the token holders are just speculative holders. These are people that airdrop farm. These are people who provided liquidity and they get tokens. These folks are not entirely misaligned with the DAO, but they're not entirely aligned with the DAO either. So the idea here is you sort of have these two sides. Active members can retain their voting power and participate in DAO governance, while speculative holders can maintain the financial utility while the security returns to the DAO. This is very important because when token price goes up, what happens? As token price goes up, as I was mentioning earlier, the opportunity cost for token holders goes to a maximum, right? If you imagine a token, once it reaches infinity, the speculative value of a token disappears because the token won't go any higher in price, right? So once you get to reach the infinity, basically the only logical thing for token holders to do is sell their tokens because it'll only ever be worth less after that moment, right? And it might seem silly to talk about infinity, but actually when we think about meme coins, infinity is a very real thing, right? If you remember from a couple cycles ago, there was a great tweet about someone investing in meme coins and they said, you know, if the token goes to 0, I lose $100, but if the token goes to $1, I'm a trillionaire, right? There's actually an infinity somewhere in meme coins where it's just not possible for them to get any more valuable, and that's when everybody sells out of them, right? This happens with DAOs as well, where there's an upper limit where the tokens won't be any more valuable. In the LST design, however, as the token price goes up, more users opt for the LST so that they can access the financial utility, right? And this is also compounded in the fact that the DAO is returning revenue. So it's kind of this one-way function where as the token price goes up, the DAO becomes more and more secure. There's actually no incentive for folks ever to leave this system. This is very important. Many people are going to be building liquid staked governance tokens. This isn't an entirely new idea. We know people are thinking about this, but there's a huge danger here as well. When we talk about returning voting power to the DAO, there's something else we could do with that voting power, which is we could sell it for yield, right? We could basically say to malicious attackers or anyone else, hey, you can purchase the voting power, and the amount of money that you spend to purchase this voting power, we will give back to the token holders. And there's a really great simple example of what these sort of organic bribe markets for DAO tokens look like. I can create a proposal that says, everyone who votes for this proposal gets a portion of the treasury. And the earlier that you vote for the proposal, the larger your proportion of your treasury will be. And everyone who does not vote for this proposal gets nothing. Right? And this kind of single-purpose bribe market is really interesting because the way DAOs are designed, there's actually no penalty if you vote for it. Right? If you vote for it and it doesn't pass, nothing happens. But if you don't vote and it does pass, you're robbed. Right? So there's this weird game theory design that ends up happening here where it's in your interest to vote to destroy the DAO. It's very dangerous, right? So in our design here, actually the liquid stake tokens that we create are actually owned and controlled by the underlying DAO. This is a permissionless protocol where anyone can launch the official canonical LST version of a DAO token. So think of Uniswap, where you have the Uniswap protocol and anyone can launch liquidity pools, right? Same sort of idea. It's standardized, everyone gets the same LST structure, so it's very easy to integrate in third parties. We're redistributing the voting power back to the DAO, this undelegated voting power that sort of hangs out there as a danger for DAOs. And we redistribute the protocol fees to DAO delegates. So there's actually, I forgot the sentence there, but basically there's a mechanism here that actually pays the delegates who do operate the DAO. So if you're not interested in operating the DAO, you can just run off and you can earn your yield. If you are interested in it, you're actually paid. So there's a feedback mechanism here for good governance. With this protocol, DAOs can grow bigger, be more valuable, and pay delegates. I talked a little bit about this. We're dealing with the opportunity cost for token holders. We're making restaking safe for protocol tokens because remember, when they fight one another, DAO protocols are the ones that are going to lose here. We allow DAOs to create sane security parameters. If you remember earlier the example of Uniswap, now Uniswap can base their security parameters on their outstanding token supply, not on a guesstimated amount of participation. And there's actually compliant mechanisms here for returning value to token holders. I didn't get into it, but there's some new legislation in the United States which allow DAOs to actually register as DAOs legally, be compliant, and return value. So we have a test net of the protocol coming up this summer, probably late July. We invite all of you to come and participate and help out. If you have any questions, you can email me as well, and I guess we have maybe 2 minutes if there's any questions of the audience.
Thank you so much for a fantastic talk. A round of applause for Dennison, please. Right, you fine young ladies and gentlemen. Anyone got any questions? Yes, please. The microphone will be with you in just a second.
Hey, thanks for the talk. I've been thinking about a problem. Let's say like a group of people here at the hackathon built a project and they want to carry on building it afterwards. And they want to start on solid grounding with a good DAO framework for them. I haven't seen much solutions around like that solves this kind of like that takes the contributors into the design from scratch. It seems really stupid if those 3 or 4 people need to go set up a company, raise some funds from VCs, and then start a foundation and then DAO decentralize it through that. It seems much more nicer if we can just start from scratch. Have you thought about this kind of area? Yeah,
that's ICOs 2017. Right? You just create a token, you sell it to people, and give it away. Unfortunately, we can't do that. Right? Like DAOs, this is another problem. I didn't speak to this, but DAOs actually can't return value directly to token holders. Right? Because some token holders do work, but other token holders don't do work. You can't return value to all of them at once because some of them will be benefiting off the work of others, which makes it a security. So DAOs can't return value to token holders directly, which makes this problem that I outlined even more extreme. That's why there's actually a staking layer that is being built in many DAOs now, where in exchange for working for the protocol, voting, doing delegation, you can actually be paid for work, right? But you have to provide some sort of service. You can't just hold a token and you know, be rewarded for that.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, please? Yes. Thank you. The microphone is on its way. Go for it.
Great talk, thank you. I have one question about the redistribution of the voting power. I just don't really understand how that would work. Basically, like the example you said, like I will have my tokens on Coinbase, so I'm more like for the financial gain. Yeah. Don't vote. How my voting power actually gets redistributed back, and who has now the power?
Yeah. So the LST token holders get to decide how they want to redistribute their voting power. And there can be many strategies there. The simplest would be just pro rata among delegated token holders. We're working with a number of different teams that actually have different ideas of how to reward delegates, like based on their contributions elsewhere, ZK's stuff, proofs of like how they participate. We actually think that this is going to depend a lot on the community. Different communities are going to have different things that they care about. But the LST holders are the ones that get to decide that. So if you hold the LST, you can basically say, hey, let's redistribute our pool of voting power pro rata. The people who hold the LST can go off and go, okay, I know my voting power distributed pro rata. If the DAO token holders that don't hold LSTs disagree with how that works, because for example, they could all delegate to one big delegate and make them a super delegate, right? That super delegate could potentially pay people off to do that. The underlying DAO token holders can at any time move into the LST and change the parameters. So this is why we say the LST is actually owned by the DAO. It's not owned by the Tally protocol. The Tally protocol allows you to create the LST, but then it's actually the LST DAO token holders that control it itself. So if they disagree with how the voting power is being redistributed, they simply move into the LST, they change the parameters. Right? So because you can move in and out of the LST at any time, right? It's one-to-one, although the LST actually earns yield. So the longer you hold the LST, that's the incentive for having the LST, right? You get paid. You can move in and out. It allows the DAO to basically own it, and set those parameters. So it's safe for them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the great questions and the great answers. Ladies and gentlemen, one more round of applause, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, a piece of trivia, it's actually really interesting that the average DAO size is around 200 people, which also corresponds eerily closely to the Dunbar number, which is the optimal size of hunter and gatherer tribal societies before they kind of splinter and fall apart and stop functioning. So you can see it's important to be interdisciplinary and collate humanities with modern technological innovations. Right, I will go and run away from this stage, not because I wouldn't like you guys, but because I'm off to do those videos. So remember, videos, if you want to be my victim and show yourself off in your project in terms of the humans of Eat Prague, then I'll be kind of loitering around that area outside of the rain in the main hall. So I hope to see you there. We'll set up the camera and let you know. I'll be now exchanged by a phenomenal moderator, Mickey, and we have 3 more talks ahead of us before the sad conclusion, but don't worry, there's an after party coming as well. There's plenty of food and booze outside, so I think we've got a lot of fun yet to come on this rainy Sunday. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.